Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone for being here today. As Chris said, my name's Siobhan and I'm a Principal Research Analyst at the Australian Institute of Criminology. I'm going to be presenting on this topic of examining women's experiences of forced criminality in cyber scam centres in Southeast Asia. And I'm presenting on behalf of my colleagues and collaborators who are here with us in the room today, Samantha Lynham and Chris Dowling. And we're presenting this work for the first time, so it is still very preliminary. We've only just finished drafting the results up, and what I'm going to be presenting today is a subset of those results most relevant to the theme of the conference. So we're all aware of an increase in online and phone scams over the past 5 years, particularly since COVID. But what is less well known is that many of the people on the other end of that line, trying to trick you or your loved ones out of their life savings, are actually victims of trafficking for the purposes of forced criminality. That is, they themselves were tricked and trafficked into their situation, and they are being forced to conduct online scams under the threat of violence. Their passports and phones have been taken, they are subject to debt bondage, and they are under constant surveillance. The majority of victims are being held prisoner in scam compounds not too far from here, in Southeast Asia, particularly in Myanmar and Cambodia. Trafficking in persons for forced criminality in cyber scam centres has emerged as a significant security concern in Southeast Asia. And organised crime groups involved in this have considerably increased their activity since 2021. They now constitute a real threat to nation states around the world. Despite the significant proportion of women identified as both victims and perpetrators of trafficking, compared to other forms of crime, there is little information about the gender dynamics of trafficking for forced criminality in scam compounds. Gender-focused analysis of trafficking into scam compounds is crucial for understanding how gendered power imbalances and economic inequality contribute to experiences of victimisation and perpetration, as well as for the development of effective prevention, policy, and legislative responses. So this picture is of a scam compound in Myanmar taken from the Thai side of the River Moe on the border of Thailand and Myanmar. And I'm going to start with a story, and this is a common story of people trafficked into scam compounds in Southeast Asia. I'm quoting from a stakeholder that we spoke to. All the people I have interviewed were tricked under the same scheme, which is a fake job announcement on Facebook, TikTok, or LinkedIn. Everyone came for a marketing job in Bangkok. When they arrive in Bangkok, they are put in a minivan because they are told, actually, it's not in Bangkok, it's on the outskirts. They go in the minivan, they move 1 to 2 people per car, not more, to not raise alarm. Then at the checkpoint between Bangkok and Mae Sot on the border, they pass because there is a phone call that is made beforehand by the driver to the person in charge of the checkpoint, and they let pass certain plate numbers. All the women said they are moved regularly from car to car. They change 3 to 4 times, then they arrive in Mae Sot and they change cars again. Some of them were put in a hotel room for the night before being sent into Myanmar. Some of them were straight away put on the banks of the River Moe. I always ask people, when is the moment when you understood what happened to you? And most of the people, the moment that they understand is on the banks of the river. Because there is paramilitary with black clothes and masks that take care of people waiting to pass over to the other side. The women understand that this should not be happening in the middle of the night in the jungle. And they arrive on the other side, they are driven again in a small car to the compound. In the compound, on the first day, they make them sign a contract with rules around behaviour, and it is laid out what the punishment will be if the target is not met. So this presentation summarises, as I said, preliminary findings from a research project led by the AIC in partnership with the Regional Support Office of the Bali Process and UN Women. And it's based on interviews and focus groups that we conducted with stakeholders in the region, 85 stakeholders. This project aims to understand the experiences and women involved in trafficking for forced criminality into cyber scam centres in Southeast Asia. So with the support of our project partners, connecting us to events and through their networks in the region, we have consulted over 85 stakeholders who have experience or knowledge of this topic and the relevant gendered dynamics. This was done primarily through in-depth interviews. However, we also conducted 3 focus groups, one in Bangkok, one in Chiang Mai, and one in Manila, between August and October last year. So I'll begin by canvassing the results of the backgrounds of women involved and their pathways into the scam compounds, followed by an analysis of their roles and experiences, and then I'll talk through some of the findings about the intersections between gender, scams, and the technologies being used. Sorry. Stakeholders interviewed in this study agreed that most people in scam centres and scamming roles are men, but reported that women constitute a significant minority, with their estimates that women and girls account for between 20 and 40% of people involved. Most victims are young people aged 18 to 30 years, seeking skilled and unskilled work, many of whom who have recently left school or university. Their country of origin varies considerably. Stakeholders reported a diverse range of nationalities of women who are involved, referring primarily to women victims from Southeast Asia, South Asia, Eastern Europe, and Africa, with an observed increase in the women victims from African countries exiting the scam compounds over time. Most NGO stakeholders that we spoke to reported supporting women from a number of different countries from around the world, rather than women from one specific region. There were mixed results about the typical victim profile. So this in terms of their education and their socioeconomic background. Some stakeholders said that many women victims they had encountered had a more traditional trafficking victim profile with low to moderate levels of education and women who were looking for manual or service type roles. However, we found that women from middle-income countries were also being affected, with a considerable number of women having a university education and being deceptively recruited, specifically for their skills in language or marketing. Stakeholders agreed that women often had dysfunctional family backgrounds or were living situations of conflict or areas with a lack of work opportunities. Some stakeholders also reflected on changes over time, where originally women were being recruited to scam centres primarily for the purposes of sexual exploitation. However, over time, the syndicates realised that they could make more money off them from scamming, and so recruited more skilled women for that purpose. One of the key themes related to how women are trafficked and recruited into scam centres shows that women are more likely to be recruited through personal networks, either online or offline. Multiple stakeholders reported that women are more likely than men to be recruited by someone they know, such as a work colleague, a family member, a friend, or a boyfriend. They said that women tend to be more cautious about applying for a job ad online and travelling overseas alone for work, but they will trust an acquaintance, a friend, or a family member who presents them with an opportunity. Women in scam centres are also commonly being recruited by a man that they are in a relationship with, a romantic relationship, and either this relationship could be real and the partner is in the scam centre and convinces them to come too, or it's fake and they're being tricked into coming. And I'll talk more about this in a minute. So one stakeholder spoke about how many victims are tricked by a man from their own community. They said that Russian woman was also sold by her boyfriend. It's the boyfriend who was in Thailand for a while. He said, "Come join me, I have a job for you," and she ends up there. The next quote relates to young girls being brought in by their older boyfriends. And the third quote illustrates the trafficking of women by their neighbours and friends. They said they invite the women to go to Myanmar to work in a nail salon or as a hairdresser, and then they traffic the victim into the compound. I'll contextualise this as well a bit more in a minute. While less common, women are also being recruited and trafficked into scam compounds through fake job advertisements online. So this occurs when a victim applies for a fake job advertisement, often through mainstream social media platforms like Facebook and LinkedIn. And as in the story that I told in the beginning, several stakeholders spoke about women who applied for a marketing job in Bangkok before being trafficked into a scam compound in Myanmar, Cambodia, or Laos PDR. We heard that men are more likely to apply for IT roles and women were more likely to apply for marketing roles. And stakeholders sort of contextualise this by saying that it reflects gender differences in what men and women study in this region, as well as efforts by criminal syndicates to recruit victims with relevant skills to conduct romance scams, as well as recruit people of a certain age. Most stakeholders agreed that basic skills required for scamming were the same for men and women, and these were language proficiency, either English or Chinese, and computer literacy. Regional gendered dimensions to recruitment into scam compounds were reported by stakeholders, where in Cambodia it was more common for women to be lured into scam centres through a male partner or someone that they met online. So they said in Cambodia it's more about the partnership, but then in Myanmar I found this pattern is not there. It's going through the general job advertisement in Thailand and then getting kidnapped in Thailand. Women hold a range of roles in scam compounds in Southeast Asia, including scammers, sex workers, recruitment and HR, models and leaders. While women's place in the criminal hierarchy of scam centres can vary, their roles most commonly reflect issues of gender inequality in the region and harmful stereotypes around women's duty in society, that all women are caregivers and nurturers whose purpose it is to be sexually available and subservient to men. Men and women can be scammers. More men are scammers than women. One role that is characteristic of women and scamming is the role of the models. So these are attractive women who are the face of the romance scams. They are often from Eastern Europe or Central Asia. So one woman will be the face of the relationship, for many fraud victims. So when a victim wants to video chat with their girlfriend, the model will be briefed on the relationship by the scammer, and it's the model's job to convince the victim that their relationship and their investment are real. Attractive women may be given this role when they arrive in the compound after being recruited for something else or applying for something else, or women can be deceptively recruited for related jobs like hospitality or entertainment roles. Men can also be models, but it is typically a role occupied by women. Stakeholders tended to agree that it was mostly men in management and leadership positions. This was frequently based on evidence that the majority of victims they had supported and spoken to had referred to male managers and supervisors. However, we are hearing reports of quite a few female recruiters, and this is consistent with what we know about female perpetration in other forms of trafficking, such as sex trafficking, and it's partly related to women being perceived as more trustworthy than men and other things which I will talk about in a minute. Women seem more likely than men to move around from one role to another, and also to occupy multiple and often overlapping roles. So this quote demonstrates how women's roles can change over time and how they shift from being a trafficking victim to a perpetrator, either through a motivation to survive or simply to improve their circumstances. It also relates to our finding that women are often recruited through someone they know, as this is one key way that people can escape their situation. So they said, if you're brought in as a scammer, you're bad at scamming, so you're made into a sex slave. At first you have no rights, but then if you cozy up to the management or if you somehow impress them, they might give you the autonomy to go out of the centre and recruit 10 more women. That's what these guys do. How you earn your freedom is by entrapping other people. This second quote shows how women are often expected to hold multiple roles within scam compounds. So they said, all of the women in the scam centre, they still be viewed as a servant of people there. When people are sick, they can look after them. They do a lot of what we would call serving jobs for the people in the centre. They serve their needs, physical needs, sexual need, anything. So we see gender intersecting with technology in the scamming process in multiple ways. Scammers are targeting all gender and sexual identities. However, stakeholders reported that most of the targets of scams are wealthy East Asian, North American and European heterosexual men who are looking for physically attractive or exotic-looking women online. The primary scam being run is the hybrid romance investment cryptocurrency scams. However, there were also reports of scams targeting people to invest in fake companies, cars, property. Scams were tailored to the fraud target, their circumstance and the amount of money that they would have to invest, with the romance investment cryptocurrency scams most commonly targeted at people in more wealthy countries. People are frequently being targeted for fraud on dating apps and other forms of social media, as we have been hearing about throughout this conference. The romance investment cryptocurrency scams are gendered by nature, primarily tailored to men and exploiting gender power dynamics and roles. The scammer impersonates a love interest and builds trust with the fraud target over time, and then encourages the target to invest as much as possible in a fraudulent cryptocurrency scheme. Stakeholders told us about how women report being given a phone and a computer as soon as they arrive in the scam compounds and being told to assume or create fake profiles. They then use these to target fraud victims online, approaching people to see who responds, and if they manage to get someone's WhatsApp details, at some point down the line, that account is passed on to another department who then manages the investment phase. Given that the primary scams involve a woman seducing a man online, some stakeholders noted that it's surprising that the proportion of women in scam compounds is so low, at 20 to 40%, as there isn't any reason why women would be any worse at scamming, and you could even argue that women would be better at pretending to be other women online. Instead, what we have is a lot of men and some women pretending to be a particular type of woman, trying to seduce other men and scam them. So this quote highlights the typical scam being run, which is targeted at male victims, and also how there's some variability in the companies, the scam compound companies, about who they target. So they said some of the companies have targeted American guy, for example. They have an account of a young rich model lady in their 20s trying to scam a 50-year-old retired rich man in America. So we do see women being the victims of romance scams. A couple of stakeholders commented that it doesn't really matter what gender or sexual identity the scammer identifies as, because they are provided with tools and guidelines for approaching different types of victims. So one of these is a phrase book, which is like a resource outlining different types of strategies for approaching and establishing connections with different types of targets. It provides examples to use in a broad variety of scenarios. We're also seeing romance scams being applied as a recruitment tool. These practices exploit gendered stereotypes around men and women's vulnerabilities. For men, it is status and financial security. For women, it is relationships. The relationship between the recruiter and the trafficking target can be platonic or romantic, but the aim is to groom the target and convince them to come to the scam compound. The recruiter may be getting paid a commission, so he may be motivated to date the victim and get some emotional control over them to make their job easier. So this stakeholder explains how seduction is being used as a strategy to recruit women online. They said, they are seeking something else than male victims. It's not money that really matters. They start dating with someone online and they say, oh, I'm in Thailand, I'm in Cambodia, do you want to come visit? I can pay you, I love you so much. This stakeholder spoke about how there are more female models than male models because it's easier to target men, but when women are victims, they are targeted based on different circumstances. So they said, for example, if you're a single mum, divorced, 2 kids, or if you are a businesswoman, extremely busy, having a not so great relationship, or just broke up with your boyfriend, the scammers will use different scenarios. So this is an example as well of the scripts and phrase books supporting the scamming process and how these are being used to support scammers to target different types of victims. Another finding worth highlighting is the use of large language models in scamming. So similar to many of us in our regular jobs, what they're being taught to do is if they're stuck with a client or a target asks them something, they can consult an AI model. Like, what should I say? So they're not using mainstream models like ChatGPT, because if you try typing in a prompt, ChatGPT saying, hey, I'm trying to scam this person, they said this, what should I say? It won't allow you to do that. But we did hear reports of there being bootlegged or cloned large language models with the safety features removed being used for this purpose in this context. Lastly, I spoke about the role of models who are there if the victim wants to video chat with their girlfriend. So the model is an attractive woman who's the face of the scam for many victims and is really key in persuading the fraud target to invest and make the transfer. So we did see or hear about an overlap between the models and the use of AI software. where multiple stakeholders spoke about the use of deepfakes, images, voice, and video in this context. So this might be to superimpose the image of an attractive woman whose picture they took from social media onto an actual person working in the compound. It could be a female scammer or a feminine-looking male scammer. Not only gender, but it could also be used to change the ethnicity of the person, whatever they need to do to convince the victim that the scam is real. So we did challenge stakeholders about the sophistication of the technology and whether the quality would actually be good enough to be believable and make a man actually look like a woman on a video call. And the stakeholder did express scepticism at the time of the interview, which was in October, but cautioned that the technology is fast advancing and said, it's good enough now to fool people with low media literacy levels, but a better question is, at what rate is it getting better? And the answer to that is that extremely fast. If you just look at where it was 2 years ago to where it is today, the short answer is, even if it's not that good now, it's going to get there in a year. By the time your report is out, it's going to be there already. So there's a lot to say about women's experiences in scam centres, but I'm going to focus on sexual exploitation because this just featured in various ways throughout our consultations, as you can expect. This includes routine experiences of sexual abuse, the use of threats of sexual violence to control women's behaviour, the use of sexual violence as punishment for not meeting targets or non-compliance, the use of women as sexual rewards to motivate male scammers who perform well, and the re-trafficking of women who are not effective scammers into sexual exploitation. Businesses dedicated to scamming and sites of sexual exploitation are often co-located in the same buildings, in scam compounds, and there is undoubtedly voluntary sex work occurring. However, as these environments are characterised by exploitation and coercion, the extent of this is difficult to gauge. We were told accounts of young girls as young as 11 who ran away from home, went over to Cambodia to a scam compound, but were not effective scammers, and so were punished and subject to sexual abuse by multiple men before being rescued. Regional differences again, it's hard to say, but it looks like with Cambodia there are more women going to scam compounds, knowingly or not, following relationships or seeking work. Whereas in Myanmar, it's more extreme in all aspects, reflecting the significant instability in this region where there is less rule of law, a lot more kidnapping, less women, and a lot more severe sexual violence against the women who are actually there. Sexual services are also being advertised on Telegram groups that are specific to scamming hubs. So these ads include the background of the person being advertised and their price, and some very high prices for some women and services, indicating that many of these online ads are targeted to higher level management and scam bosses rather than lower level scammers and trafficking victims for whom brothels are typically used as incentives. So this first quote speaking to one of the ads on the Telegram chat groups for the scam compound in Sri Koko, which is a notorious scam city in Myawaddy, Myanmar, on the Thai-Myanmar border. So they said they're talking about the difference between women from different backgrounds and how there was a higher demand for women who were Chinese. Again, the second quote emphasises some regional differences reported by stakeholders. They said NGO groups in Myanmar, they'll tell you the situation there is quite different. They receive a lot more gender-based violence cases. However, we emphasise that while victims in Cambodia may be treated a bit better, generally speaking, significant human rights abuses, including severe sexual violence, remain commonplace in Cambodian compounds. So, in conclusion, in summary, women and girls constitute a significant minority of people in scam centres. Their experiences are unique and shaped by gender inequality and sexual exploitation. Women and men are being recruited and scammed using strategies that exploit gendered vulnerabilities and stereotypes. Both women and men can have roles as scammers, recruiters, or leaders, but our data suggests that the roles most commonly occupied by women relate to sexual services and models, who support the scamming process by providing a convincing face for it. Lastly, deepfake AI technology is increasingly being used to make scammers appear more feminine in photos and videos, and it's likely that this technology will continue to be harnessed to effectively impersonate people online, which may lead to less demand for real women to occupy this role. Thank you for your time.
you.